A very good morning and a warm welcome to all of you here in Brussels. May I invite you to take a seat in our Studio 5. Thanks for joining our session on education and research. I also warmly welcome the participants who have tuned in to channel number 5 remotely, so thanks as well for joining the European Development Days. My name is Philip. I will be happy to be your thematic moderator for today, to guide you through our program, to connect the dots and to try to derive the key takeaway messages and the greater common denominators throughout our discussions. And we do have a rather congested agenda cooked up for you today on this ever important topic of education and research. Because indeed, being more connected can transform education and research systems. Connections include supporting the education workforce and making it easier for academics to move across the world. In our session today, we will focus on the role of digital, as well as making systems inclusive, especially for girls, for women, and for vulnerable groups. And our education and research stream is divided into two topics today. So first, we will focus on science, technology, research and innovation. And after that, we will dive deeper into quality education. And for both topics, we have scheduled a high-level panel, we have a lab debate, and we have a project report. So that adds up to 6 consecutive sessions. So we're about to embark on a fairly, or a rather rich agenda that will run until complete exhaustion tonight. But before we get started with our program, allow me to lay down some rules of travel to navigate through this hybrid event. First and foremost, this is intended to be a silent conference, so may I please invite all of you to please mute your mobile phones. It is a silent conference because we don't have any loudspeakers in the room, but you will be able to follow the proceedings through your earpieces. And those very earpieces, they also serve as interpretation, which is available both in English and in French. And although it is a silent conference, we very much would like to hear your voice. So we cordially invite all of you to engage in an interactive dialogue, to submit any questions or remarks that you may have to our keynote speakers or to our panel members, and we will be using Slido as a means of harvesting your questions and remarks, or picking the brains or the wisdom of the crowds, if you like. So that's slido.com #EDD2022. That will be our main channel to fish your questions and remarks, and we'll try to blend them into the panel discussions later today. If you choose to also interact on social media platforms and to join that dialogue on social media, I suggest you use the hashtag #EDD22. And of course, to connect to those social media platforms, you may need a wireless network. So for those of you joining us here in Brussels, that's EDD Public. You don't need a password, you can readily connect to EDD Public. For those of you joining our online platform, I have a faint feeling that you have already identified a wireless network. And then without further ado, let's start our program. So let's embark on our first session on science, technology, innovation and research. And in this knowledge triangle of education, research and innovation, all 3 elements play a vital role in shaping a future which is equitable and which is inclusive. We plan, this morning we plan a lab debate on connecting partner researchers for sustainable and resilient agriculture. We'll also have a project report on re-greening Africa and the Great Green Wall. But I'd like to start our session with a high-level panel on the EU Innovation Agenda. And that Innovation Agenda is an initiative which is co-owned by the European Union and the African Union, and is governed under the high-level policy dialogue on science, technology and innovation. During our high-level panel, we'd like to present that innovation agenda and the challenges it addresses. We also want to review the feasibility of the measures that would need to be deployed both in Africa and in Europe to make sure that the objectives of the agenda are attainable in the short, the medium and the long term. At the very same time, we'd like to seek input and feedback also from this audience on the objectives, the proposed actions and potential additional work streams to ensure that this agenda will be designed and implemented in response to actual current and future societal needs. It is a high-level panel indeed, because I enjoy both the pleasure and the privilege of welcoming some panel members of very high caliber. So may I already invite the 3 panel members which are with me here in Brussels to join me on stage. That's Ms. Irina Reis, Mr. Musi Kafela and Elisha Kaleb. If you could please join me on stage. A very warm welcome to the panel. Thanks for joining me in Brussels. We have a couple of panel members joining us remotely, and I'll be introducing them shortly. Perhaps let me start by introducing my first panel member for this morning's session, which is Ms. Irina Reis, who is responsible for, amongst others, women in innovation, research and education, digital education, skills structural dialogue in the cabinet of Maria Gabriel, European Commissioner for Research, Innovation, Education, Culture and Youth. A very warm welcome to the panel, Irina. May I invite you to frame, on behalf of the European Commissioner, the context and the challenges of the EU Innovation Agenda?
It works, or?
No, it works.
It works, okay. Thank you, dear panelists, dear Minister Kagafela, dear ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to this high-level panel. I'm here on behalf of Commissioner Maria Gabriel, who could not join us today, but asked me to represent her on her behalf. So I'm very happy to be here, and it's my first European and Development Days, so it's new for me as well. And I'm very glad to open this panel, which I think will be very practical and quite interesting, because it is dedicated to a specific innovation agenda. So for those who might know or don't not know, 1 year ago, the R&I ministers from the European Union and the African continent met and decided to work even more strategic in 4 areas. And this is public health, science and technology, innovation, and science performance. And these are the main building blocks of this innovation agenda that we are discussing today. I think one of the strong points on this agenda is that Commissioner Gabriel's team has really put a lot of focus on consulting stakeholders. So not only have we an advisory group composed of women and men, scientists from very different scientific background from both continents, but they have been different ages, and they together also consulted more than 500 stakeholders, and not only scientific organizations, but also startups, entrepreneurs, and civil society. So I think that is a very strong block of this work. Right now there is an open consultation, so there is a draft of the agenda. There is an open consultation with concrete questions for you to react, to add what is missing, what is completely not off, or what is right on. And this public consultation closes just in 10 days, the 30th. And of course today is also an important day. I just want to finish by also for the audience, give you some examples of the cooperation we have had with many countries. So since 2016, we have 2 big partnerships together with our African partners. One is on sustainable food, and the other one is on climate change and sustainable energy. And together there is over, I think, 860 million euros. So it's a big investment, but it's also very important to see the projects coming out of this investment. Then another very interesting pilot that I hope we will discuss today is the pilot, innovation pilot that was launched more than 2 years ago, who has connected more than 120 incubators, I think, between Europe and Africa. This is a pilot very dear to the Commissioner, and she really wants to have feedback on how this has worked and also discuss its potential follow-up. Let me see. And I think you know that we, in the first Horizon Europe work program for 2021, we had over 36 topics focused on collaboration between the two continents. And I looked at the topics yesterday, most of them have closed, so the negotiation with projects is going on, but it's in really various range of topics, from energy, renewable energy, to gender equality and civil society implementation. And now I think it's a very important moment because we are programming the 23 and 24 work program. It's really now that colleagues are busy drafting. And so I hope audience and others take the opportunity to give us more ideas of what we can fund together.
Thanks a lot, Irina, for outlining the innovation agenda. I also hear a warm plea again for stakeholder consultation. So we have an open public consultation for 10 more days until the end of the month. So now indeed is a time to speak up and also have your say. You can also speak up, of course, during the remainder of our panel discussion. So thanks, Irina, for outlining this innovation agenda, which ultimately aims to translate investments in research and innovation into actual business, services and jobs, and to develop a long-term and sustainable operational model of cooperation between the European Union and the African Union. And then to also hear from the African Union, to hear their perspectives, we do have a video message from Professor Mohamed Ballochin. Professor Ballochin has a long career in health and medicine, assuming different positions such as head of department for internal medicine at Algeria, director of the division of non-communicable diseases of the WH Regional Office for Africa in Harare, UN system coordinator and UNDP resident representative in Tunisia, WH representative in Nigeria, Tanzania and Guinea, providing technical support in response to the Ebola epidemic. And then with the outbreak of COVID-19, he was appointed as member of the scientific committee monitoring the pandemic. In October last year, Professor Ballochin was elected as Commissioner for Education, Science, Technology and Innovation within the African Union. So let's listen to the perspectives of the African Union on the AU-EU innovation agenda.
Scaffolding by draining to the north in general and to Europe in particular, the best elites trained thanks to this very cooperation. I think we all share this concern. How then can we put in place concrete mechanisms to minimize this phenomenon and create an environment favorable to the development, consolidation, and perpetuation of research and innovation in Africa, a necessary condition for reducing continental and, by extension, global vulnerabilities. I wish you fruitful deliberations, and I thank you for your attention.
Well, I believe that were already some most interesting opening statements from both the European Union and the African Union to scope our high-level panel on the innovation agenda. And I propose to start our roundtable discussion, and what better way to start than by asking the very first question. And to answer that question, I'm delighted to introduce to you the Honourable Minister Musikafela from Botswana. His Excellency previously held the position of attorney at the High Court and all the other civil courts of Botswana. From October 2019 to May 2021, he was Minister of Infrastructure and Housing Development, and he is currently Minister of Trade and Industry. A very warm welcome to our studio, Minister. Thanks for joining us here in Brussels today. We are discussing the scope and challenges of the innovation agenda, so allow me to ask you right away, what is the expectation of Botswana for this AU-EU innovation agenda? And I think you can rest assured that the mic will work, Minister.
It's already on.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I hold instructions from Botswana. And my instructions are to avert exclusion from the global economy, contribute towards implementing the objectives which are set forth in the AU-EU innovation agenda, and to ensure that we accelerate the implementation. We haven't stood idle in Botswana when it comes to innovation. We have an agenda, a vision called Vision 2036, in terms of which we intend by then to have created a knowledge-based economy. We have set up institutions in Botswana which are to assist us in innovation. We have the Botswana Digital Innovation Hub, which we set up in 2012. We also have smart spots. And we have also set up the Maung Science Park. All of them have as their objective the development and the implementation of a digital transformation, or the digital transformation strategy, which we have taken up into our hands to pursue. We seek to create and support incubation and startup. We also have a strategy to maximize impacts of the Horizon Europe initiative. We have the digital business package for women entrepreneurs. Through all of these initiatives and these institutions, whose objective is to support the AU and EU innovation, they will all support and strengthen our ambition as Botswana to play a leading role in the fourth industrial revolution by demonstrating how a modern economy can thrive in a healthy environment. We seek to promote innovation in various sectors by facilitating scientific cooperation between researchers and academic community to develop knowledge and share technology and expertise. We seek to leverage innovation as a key enabler and driver of economic growth, creation of jobs or creator of jobs and to diversify our economy from a single commodity one, as it has been before. We seek to foster exchange and sharing of experiences on making industry the center of innovation to help refocus attention and innovation and digital entrepreneurship across various sectors. And we seek to strengthen the digital entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystems and corresponding value chains. It is our objective to strengthen technology and innovation capabilities as an enabler for countries like Botswana to take advantage of the opportunities brought about, especially by the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, and exploit our global value chains. This, we hope, will ensure the building of capacities and the competitiveness of digital or innovative solutions created in Africa. We also seek to promote research to provide solutions to socio-economic problems in our country. We seek to promote exports and attract investments and assist the country to be integrated in the global economy. So with these, it is our hope that the AU-EU Innovative Agenda can help support our quest towards accelerating digital transformation and diversifying our economy. We look forward to constructively contributing to these discussions and to ensure that it can add impetus to our national development imperatives and our collective aspirations espoused under the African Union's Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. We seek to create a knowledge-based economy, as I've said, and we aspire to increase the overall competitiveness and economic diversification and position ourselves as a leader in African and in digital innovations.
Thanks a lot, Your Excellency, for highlighting Botswana's expectation for the innovation agenda, at the very same time voicing some aspirations and ambitions, but also showcasing some tangible actions already on the terrain. The floor will be open for the audience, both online and in the room as well at the end of our session, but please, I already cordially invite you to submit your questions through Slido, #EDD 2022. And since the European Development Days are a hybrid event, my next panel member will be joining us remotely. Maria da Graça Carvalho is member of the European Parliament, where she is, amongst others, full member of the Special Committee on Artificial Intelligence in the Digital Era, and also full member and vice coordinator of the Industry, Research and Energy Committee. Thanks for joining our online panel today, Maria. My question for you is, how can this AU-EU innovation agenda contribute to a broader cooperation between the African Union and the European Union?
Good morning. It's an honor to be here today with you. I apologize that I'm in Brussels in the European Parliament, but I have immediately after a vote that I cannot miss. And so it's a pleasure also to be in such an important event. Let me start by welcoming to Brussels so many high-level representatives from different African countries, and this shows the importance of that we all give to cooperation between African Union and European Union. Special regarding to what we call the knowledge triangle: research, innovation, and higher education. And the new EU-African Union Strategic Innovation Agenda is a very important instrument and it will contribute to the economic growth and the creation of jobs and better jobs. The development of the innovation ecosystem that is so important for the economic growth in any country, in any region, building research and innovation networks between Europe and Africa, and that are beneficial for both sides, and scaling up existing programs and projects, the good practices. In one word, I could define all this in something that I have been defending in all my life in my different roles as Minister of Science and Innovation in Portugal, where I had a lot of cooperation with, mainly with the Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa. And the words that define this is capacity building. Capacity building is very important to be present in all our cooperation. And capacity building primarily in African countries, and the cooperation will be much more than financing projects, then financing infrastructures, then to have mobility. All that will not serve as the purpose if it's not a strong component of capacity building. It needs to contribute to increase the individual capacity building, but also the institutional capacity building of the countries in order to improve the quality of life of the local society, the local communities, to foster the creation of the local business, to create opportunities for people that are there in order to go against this tendency of the brain drain that is something very bad for any country. We know also in some of our European countries there is brain drain from, for example, countries like Portugal to the center of Europe. So it's the same phenomenon that happens in some countries of Africa, is a brain drain, and we really need to create the conditions that this doesn't happen. This is why the strategic innovation agenda, well designed, is so important. And it will create critical mass. It will, we hope, give the brightest minds in these nations the opportunities, the possibility to stay in their countries. If they want, they can have to be mobile, to come for some time to other countries, but they have the conditions to go back and to work in their own countries, and this is very important. So to help to be in their countries, to help their countries to grow economically, and the well-being of these countries. And capacity building is not a one-way street, is good for both, for Africa and for European, because when we do capacity building is a two-way process. And in all this, health is a priority. And I always mention when I speak about cooperation with Africa, one initiative that is, in my view, an example to follow. That is the EDCTP, the program on clinical trials on AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. I was fortunate enough to be in the origin with the Prime Minister of that time of Mozambique, Mr. Pascoal Mukumbi, that we have proposed in 2003 the first public partnership that is now a very important success. We are now in the third phase, and I have been following this as a rapporteur in the European Parliament. It's now called Global Health. It is a cooperation between the European Union and 39 sub-Saharan African countries, where teams are working together in the African countries, mixed teams between Europeans and African, contributing at the same time that they do the research, they do the clinical trials, but they contribute to the capacity building of the regions where they are, in terms of health, in terms of ethics committee, and they are developing fantastic results. For example, the first ever malaria vaccine for children that was recently announced by the World Health Organization was a result of these partnerships. So I will say this as a big example, because it's not a partnership that attracts and contributes to brain drain. On the opposite, it has attracted many researchers, many medical doctors from Europe to go to work in Africa, and together with the African colleagues, they have developed fantastic work, and they have contributed to strengthen, to give capacity building to the African institutions. This is an example to follow in many other areas, in energy, in climate change, and as I said, we need to fight this flagell of the brain drain and to give the capacity to the regions in order to benefit both Europe and Africa in this cooperation. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Maria. And I clearly heard indeed the requirement for capacity building, encouraging intellectual mobility and geographic mobility, but without avoiding, or with avoiding, of course, the risk for brain drain. So thanks a lot for highlighting the role of science, technology and innovation for sustainable development. My next panel member will be joining remotely as well, but this time out of Pretoria. Professor Aggrey Ambale works as Head of Science, Technology and Innovation Hub at the African Union Development Agency, New Partnerships for Africa's Development, which is headquartered in South Africa. He is supervising the teams that are implementing programs in science, technology, health and education. Professor Ambale led the African Union's team that coordinated the development of the Science, Technology and Innovation Strategy for Africa 2014 to 2024, and he's actively involved in the implementation. So, Professor, I believe you are the best person to ask what, in your view, will be key in ensuring a successful and sustainable implementation of the agenda's ambitions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I'm also grateful and it's an honor for inviting me to participate in this, at this high-level, panel on the EU innovation agenda. I have had the privilege of going through the agenda, and really, I must congratulate those who drafted the agenda. It's very clear and indeed speaks to pertinent issues, that basically are important for the two continents. The question has been basically, what are the key? What will be key in ensuring successful and sustainable implementation of this agenda's ambitions? In response, I would first of all like to look at the priority areas that have been identified. Public health, green transition, innovation and technology, as well as capacity building for sciences, in Africa as well as Europe. Now, these are quite interesting. What I see here is the fact that actually these priority areas were valid in 2014 when you designed STISA, and they are still valid until today, 8+ years later. I know that STISA will be going through probably a review since it was a 10-year strategy. But again, what is coming out here, as priority areas is quite important. It should inform whatever reviews will be there, for STISA. Probably, this also leads to the fact that probably we may be talking of sustain the momentum, because the product areas, they still are valid. They were valid 8 years ago, and they are still valid going forward. Moderator, coming to the specifics, the agenda calls for creation of tangible impacts on the ground. At the same time, also, the agenda talks about citizen participation in the innovation ecosystem. I think this is very important. Science cannot be carried out on an island where you are far away from the community. It's time that science now is carried out within the communities. So I think that's a very key point within the agenda, the whole issue of citizen participation as well, in the innovation ecosystem. Now, the other thing, which is also important, is the fact that we need to build on previous experiences and networks that have been established over time. And I think my previous speakers have mentioned some of these networks that basically are operational on the continent, involving the EU, Africa, scientists. Now, I think one thing that probably we should be looking into as we go into the implementation of this agenda is really, the issue of developing and implementing policies for joint resourcing of the research and innovation investments. I think, the agenda does capture investments that Africa has made in research and innovation, as well as those that Europe has made. But I think one thing that we need to do is that there will have to be that deliberate effort of monitoring, the flow of investments. The agenda speaks of the fact that several European countries have actually expressed pledges to continue supporting, science and technology, bilaterally or multilaterally for Africa. Likewise, the agenda also says Africa has also, expressed similar sentiments. We have got efforts on the continent, and I'm sure our latest, initiative is the African Education, Science, Technology, and Innovation Fund, which is being established through the, the auspices of the AU, and actually with the AFDB coming in. The question is, how, can we also, through these partnerships also look into those pipelines? I think it's time that we've got research funded in a predictable manner from both the European side and the African side. I'm by no means saying that Africa is not funding research, but I think we need to have a predictable, funding process for research, that basically is spelled out in this strategy. Now, the other thing also is the fact that I think we've learned from the COVID pandemic the role of indigenous research and innovation, as well as external research and innovation in addressing challenges that we face. On both sides of the continent. I think what would be important is a policy process whereby we should have research and innovation integrated in the investment areas in the various sectors that we talk about. Talk of health, if I were to conclude on that, moderator.
Professor, sorry for interrupting, Professor. I couldn't agree more with you because I hear you saying that indeed science is not an island, and I hear a very warm plea for building bridges. Apologies for stealing your thunder here, but I'd like to go to our next remote speaker just to go around the panel. But thanks a lot for your intervention, Professor Ambali. Our next panel member will be remote as well. Bosun Tijani is CEO of the Co-Creation Hub Nigeria, which is a Pan-African technology innovation center dedicated to accelerating the application of social capital and technology for economic prosperity. Thanks a lot for joining us remotely, Bosun. You are clearly a global entrepreneur and an innovator, so may I ask you, what are the main issues, in your view, that the innovation agenda should consider in order to strengthen innovation ecosystems both in Africa and in Europe?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this. I think the European Union and also African Union over the last couple of years has been consistent in the pursuit of a more inclusive approach to supporting science and technology, but also innovation, especially in the relationship between Europe and Africa. And I think this is something that is timely. The world is moving at a pace today where at the core of the pace that we're seeing is technological innovation, but also science and technology. it is obvious that there's hardly any nation today that can sustain or survive in the current wave of changes that we're seeing without prioritizing technology, but also innovation as well. And I think a lot of the African countries, as you've heard from the last speaker, but also the minister from Botswana, recognize the place of innovation, recognize the place of science and technology, and the investment is going in really strongly. When you look at the private sector as well, there's been massive investment from the private sector into innovation on the African continent. Innovation technology hubs are now commonplace all across the countries that you look at on the continent. And this is a commitment, is an indication that there's an awareness of the need to accelerate how we strengthen innovation ecosystem on the African continent, how we support those who want to innovate to be able to innovate, and how we help them take their innovation to market. And I think for me, what is important to mainstream moving forward is how to leverage the European expertise when it comes to science and technology to further deepen the ability of the countries in Africa to support innovation. Without much support, the private sectors are innovating. You're seeing very, very innovative startups all over the continent, solving significant problems, contributing to building vibrant economies across the African continent. But we're getting to a stage where more injection of knowledge that is rooted in science is required for a lot of these startups to survive, to produce solutions to some of the pressing needs on the continent. And I think traditionally, you will find that the European area, the European Union, is constantly investing in finding new knowledge. Some of this knowledge perhaps are sitting on shelves in academic institutions across Europe. And these are knowledge that can become extremely useful for those who are building the future of Africa. So for me, the real question is, how do we mainstream, continue to mainstream innovation and science and technology in the relationship between the two continents? How do we see more knowledge transfers, not between academic institutions only, but also how do we network companies in Africa who are looking to build new solutions, new products, with companies in Europe who are looking to leverage the existing knowledge that exists in European research institutions to create new solutions. And you will find that some of these new solutions will not only solve social, but also business problems in Africa. They will also contribute into helping Europe produce new things that the world actually requires. So I think there's a need, as we talk more about science and technology, there's a need for us to bring in the participation of private institutions, of startups on both sides, not just on one side. There's a need for us to facilitate a lot more knowledge transfer. There's a need for us to also think of how do we jointly continue to monetize and commercialize research results. And for me, I think that thinking is rooted in us understanding that the shape of innovation systems is changing. And for us to be able to support innovation better, not only in Africa, but also Europe, we need to start to look at our innovation system more from a distributed perspective, where African innovators can leverage expertise that exists in Europe, or European innovators can leverage expertise or markets that exist in Africa. And this collaboration gives us the opportunity to be able to support innovation much more better for our people, and that way it's a lot more inclusive as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bosun, for highlighting those lessons to be learned by all stakeholders when implementing the innovation agenda. I think you bring up a very important point about knowledge transfer or even knowledge sharing, because it's a two-way street, and the importance of leveraging the existing body of science. So thanks a lot for that contribution, Bosun. I'd like to close our circle by turning back to Brussels and to introduce my last panel member. Elisha Caleb from Kenya has been recognized as an EDD Young Leader, and for very good reasons. Elisha is the United Nations Young Leader for Sustainable Development Goals and also the Commonwealth Youth Council Secretary General. He is an innovator, a creative thinker and an entrepreneur with a passion for emerging technology and its application to solve some of the biggest global challenges. Elisha is also founder and CEO of Agritech Plus, which is an agricultural technology company that wants to leverage precision farming to to increase production, reduce hunger, and achieve sustainable food security. We are very glad to have you on our panel, Elisha. Now, as a young leader, what do you think are the main needs on the ground that the agenda should address, with a specific emphasis maybe on youth?
Thank you very much for this great opportunity. I'm very much humbled to be part of this panel as a farmer, that is. For so long we have seen poverty as, for so long we have seen lack of food, lack of housing, and lack of clothing as poverty. But I'm here today to say that marginalization is the big cancer and the big issue in terms of poverty today. Having said that, I would like to pose this question. Indeed, do you know that 52% of people living in poverty in our rural society today are young people, despite the fact that they are the key drivers of our economy today? With the Global Gateway agenda at the table right now, I would really like to request the leaderships or the people who are mainstreaming this great agenda to consider young people to be part of the table that's on driving these agendas, and not to be part of executing the whole process of it. And at the same time, this process or the partnership should be of a win-win situation, whereby at the end of the day, the key partnership, which is the AU-EU, organizations, have at heart the interests of the mother organization. So that's the AU-EU. Having said that, I would like to say that there is an increased need to develop or to invest in innovation in Africa today. And at the same time, giving the young people the right information and at the right time, this will make it a success. That will make the Global Gateway a success, because we all know the Global Gateway agenda has come at the right time, whereby its key intentions is to go ahead of the curve. And we can always go ahead of the curve if we can involve the young people as the key drivers of the whole process. I've been raised in a farm that's in the rural Africa, whereby I've spent most of my time working with young people and rural farmers. Currently, I'm working with more than 20,000 people, that's the farmers, who are indeed seen as marginalized people of today. But we have been able, with the mere resources that we have been having and the support from the GIZ and the IFC, we have been able to give the right tools to these young people, to give the right tools, that's the agricultural inputs, fertilizers and seeds, and at the same time linking them to the market, which at the end of the day are shown the key indication that indeed the young people can make a difference in our societies today if given the right tools. Secondly, we can make this a success by making it happen. Let's not be talking about these key issues on paper. Let's mainstream the real resources to the right people using the right channels, like the investments, identifications of the right channels at grassroots levels, like organizations, startups that indeed are creating impact. At the same time and in the same spirit, I love to say that we develop the policies that indeed accommodate the young people and the women in our societies today. Saying that, I would also love to say that if we invest in agriculture today and make agriculture sexy, from this angle we are able to fight a lot of challenges which at the end of the day the Global Gateway agenda have at heart. That's will at the end of the day find that we have fought poverty, which is the cancer of today. We have fought unemployment for our young people in the rural Africa, the 52%. And at the same time, we have linked them to the right education and information. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Elisha, for also voicing, I would say, the perspectives of the youth, because the young people are, of course, the future that we should foster. I believe we do have a question, or we may have some questions on Slido, so if we could put those up the screen, then I'll like to pose those questions to our panel. And one of the questions that have come in is when African countries will be able to stop dependency to the EU humanitarian aid and to reach economic prosperity, and how. So what would be the pathway towards that economic prosperity? Maybe if I'm at liberty, Your Excellency, of addressing that question to you, how you see that, an answer to that question, and how, for instance, Botswana is on a pathway to economic prosperity in this mutual cooperation with the European Union.
Yes, certainly. Let me, when and how. The when part is a little bit difficult, but I'm unable to pinpoint a finger on when that will occur. But I can say that in the context of what we are discussing, in the context of innovation, it is important that in Africa, and in Botswana in particular, we place our entrepreneurs in a position where they're able to become innovative, because it is through innovation that you'll be able to produce and resolve problems, human challenges of day-to-day activities. Now, we need, with innovation, to be able to put value, especially on the raw materials, which get extracted, which have for centuries have been getting extracted from Africa, put value on them, so that we can, with them, resolve day-to-day problems. So we need our youngsters to be innovative in that respect. And in that way, we will then reduce the extent to which we are so dependent on Europe. And we also need fair partnership. The partnership, when we talk of it being fair, it must be fair in the true sense of the word. And I see that the agenda itself contains those sentiments in it, and I hope that we will live up to those sentiments. So I think that's really the way in which we can drastically or gradually reduce our dependency on Europe for humanitarian assistance. We need to also look into access to funding, access to financing of activities. Some of the impediments to growth is lack of access to it. And when we talk of a partnership together, it should be one which also looks into ways in which activities by innovators in Africa can be financed, so that they can find space also in the global economy. We need to transform our innovative ideas into commercial and usable products. I think that is pretty much how we can gravitate away from dependency, if I could answer that question.
I think you just absolutely did, Minister, and you touched upon what a lot of keynote speakers or panel members have addressed, this fair partnership and building mutual trust. We do have one more question on how the EU innovation agenda will be translated for the society, practically speaking, and when. So what would be the tangible projects or actions on the floor? Maybe, Irina, if I may be so bold to come to you on how you see the innovation agenda translating from, say, a paper trail to tangible, actionable plans on the ground.
Yes, thank you. I don't hear myself. I would just like to share with you, first of all, what I took from this panel, and then I will concretely reply the question. I think first one important point that Your Excellency mentioned is digital. I don't think the current draft that we have on our table is digital enough. And I think that is something we need to look at together more. You mentioned digital entrepreneurship, digital training programs for female leadership, female entrepreneurs. I think this is worth looking into more. The previous speakers also spoke about knowledge valorization, about research being on the shelves. And this is something that in general we struggle with, and it's not a new phenomenon. But I'm glad to see that on our side we are trying more and more to broaden the concept of knowledge transfer. It's not just transferring knowledge, it is valorizing it. And sometimes unexpectedly, you found project that was not at all intended for another use. So this is a very interesting aspect that I hope will be reflected in the EU-AU agenda. Elijah, you talked about youth. We all know in the audience, yes, it's the European Year of Youth. I hope it will not just be 1 year, and I truly believe that we are far beyond just tick-the-box exercise, that we have a young speaker in the panel. I think we are going beyond that in the expert groups that we have, with the stakeholders we talk. And yes, it's to be there from the onset. So yes, and what are the next steps? So I believe then in early next year, the EU the agenda will be formally adopted. You know that we have already a draft in discussion, and we also have the work program 23-24 in preparation. So I believe that many of the priorities there already will also be funded in the work program. Then we have the challenges always, what happens with the projects we fund. And I think that is a joint responsibility with the consortia and the partnerships that we put together to follow them up after signing. So, yeah.
Thanks for that, Irina. And maybe a last question, because we're a bit strapped for time, but we have another question in the AB on how the strategic partnership between the African Union and the European Union, how it could adopt a more pro-poor policy, and what would be the role that youth can play in that. And hence I'd ask the question to the young leader in the room, Elisha. What's your take on that?
Thank you very much for that wise question. I would love to answer this question from this angle. Innovation has always brought two things together which were apart. In this context, innovation is bringing the AU and AU together. Having said that, one great speaker said that the only way to be saved is to be together and reaching prosperity together at the end of the day. The only goal that we have today is innovation in young people. And the young people can be the greatest trigger of these innovations by implementing all their projects on grassroots levels, and if given the right tools from the responsible authorities. Without losing the question, to support sustainable agriculture, which is my key thing that I hold at heart, and the job opportunities, we must imagine better possibilities and great harvest in young people, because these are people who are ready to learn and implement what they have at hand today.
Thanks a lot for that, Elisha. I would like to wrap up our panel with one more question that is coming from myself, and I propose to go around the panel, which is physically present here in Brussels, but I invite you to be concise. If the innovation agenda were a post-it rather than an agenda, and you could only write, say, 3 words on that post-it, what should be high on the innovation agenda? And please, indeed, if you could limit yourself to maybe 1, 2, or 3 words. I'll start with you, Elisha.
Please come up again.
Sorry?
Repeat the question.
So if the innovation agenda were a post-it, not an entire agenda, just a post-it, and you can only write 1, 2, or 3 words, what would be highest up the agenda for you?
Agriculture.
Agriculture, point taken. Irina?
I would say innovation and inclusiveness, to have as many as countries on board, but also different stakeholders.
Okay.
So.
And Your Excellency, what would be your short list for the innovation agenda?
Knowledge exchange.
knowledge exchange. That's crystal clear. So that does wrap up my panel here today, but may I propose that we thank our panel members, Irina Royce, Mr. Musi Kafela, Buzun Tijani, Elisha Kalep, Maria da Graça Carvalho, and also Professor Agrey Ambale with a warm round of applause. So that does bring us at the end of our high-level panel. What I took away as greater common denominators is indeed building bridges. We were talking about fair partnerships, about equal partnerships in mutual respect. I heard a lot about promoting mobility, but of course with taking care of the fact that we want to avoid brain drain, digital as an enabler of innovation, and I also heard here that maybe the current draft is not digital enough, and we heard also from Maria this warm plea for capacity building. So that is what I'm taking away. Again, I want to re-emphasize that the public consultation is still open until the end of the month. We also plan a stakeholder event in Africa in November later this year to maybe return our experience on the lessons learned. That does wrap up our morning session. We are going to break for lunch now, but we do have 2 solid sessions planned for this afternoon. The first one on science, technology, innovation and research, and the second one on quality innovation. During the break, I do encourage all of you to visit our global village with no less than 78 stands with reports, cultural exhibitions, projects and activities related to all the themes of the European Development Days. For the participants joining us here in Brussels today, you will find a rather large number of food trucks where you can buy lunch between Palace 7 and 11. For those of you joining us remotely, you can join us for lunch just by simply clicking accept all cookies. Thank you and hope to see you soon in 1 hour at 1:40 sharp.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.